The stars had always called to Captain. Since she was a little girl on Earth, she had looked up at the night sky and dreamed of the worlds waiting to be found. Now, after 30 years of service, she commanded the Harbingers rest an old exploration ship carrying 2,400 souls through the darkness between stars. They were colonists, scientists, teachers, and families. They had left behind everything they knew to find a new home. For 3 years, they had traveled through empty space, following old maps that promised green worlds and blue oceans somewhere in the unclaimed reaches of the galaxy. Stood on the bridge as the ship dropped out of faster-than-light travel. Two suns burned in the distance, one orange, one white, spinning around each other in an endless dance. The sensors hummed as they scanned the system. "Captain," said Lieutenant Park, his voice shaking slightly, "we have contacts, many contacts." Felt her stomach tighten. On the screen, red dots appeared. 1, 10, 100. They kept multiplying until the display looked like it was bleeding. "How many?" she asked. "Over 800 ships, Captain, military vessels. They're surrounding us." The Harbinger's Rest had no weapons. It was never built for war. It was built to carry families to new beginnings, not to fight. A transmission cut through the silence. The face that appeared on screen was not human. It was compound eyes like black mirrors, mandibles clicking as it spoke. The translation software turned the clicks and hisses into words. "You have entered the sacred space of the hegemony. Your kind is not welcome here. Your existence is an insult to our empire." Raised her hands in a gesture of peace. "We mean no harm. We are civilians. We have families on board, children. We will leave immediately. Please just let us go." The alien's mandibles spread in what might have been a smile. "You misunderstand, warm blood. You are not being asked to leave. You are being made an example." Far away, on the throne world of the Supreme Archon watched the transmission with satisfaction. He had ruled the hegemony for 200 years, and he had grown tired of humanity's expansion. They spread across the galaxy like insects, building colonies, making alliances, growing stronger every decade. The other members of his council had advised caution. Humanity was not weak. They had fought wars and won them, but saw this single, defenseless ship as an opportunity, a message written in blood that would echo across the stars. "Broadcast this on all channels," he ordered. "Let every species see what happens to those who trespass in our space." Back on the Harbinger's Rest, watched the warships move into attack formation. She had sent distress signals. She had begged for mercy. She had offered everything she could think of. None of it mattered. "All hands," she said over the ship's intercom, her voice steady even as her heart broke. "This is the captain. I want you to know that it has been my greatest honor to serve with you. Hold your loved ones close. Whatever happens next, we face it together." In the passenger sections, parents pulled their children tight. Old friends held hands. Couples whispered words of love they had been saving for another time, a time that would never come. The first missile struck the engine section. The ship shuddered and screamed as metal tore apart. Fire bloomed in the corridors. The second and third missiles hit the living quarters, heard the screams through the intercom before the connection died. More missiles came. They were not trying to disable the ship. They were not trying to capture it. They were tearing it apart piece by piece, slowly, making sure the cameras caught every moment of destruction. The bridge was burning. Half her crew was dead. The others were trying to seal breaches, save who they could, do anything at all. But there was nothing to be done. The Harbinger's Rest was dying, and everyone on it was dying with her. She found the emergency transmitter still working. With her last strength, she activated it and spoke into the recorder. Behind her, the showed fighters swooping past, firing into the wreckage, hunting for survivors. "This is Captain of the Harbinger's Rest," she said. Her voice did not shake. She would not give them that. "We came in peace. We asked for mercy. They gave us none." She paused as another explosion rocked the ship. The lights flickered and died. Only the emergency power remained, casting everything in red. "They're killing children," she continued. "They're broadcasting it like entertainment. I don't know if anyone will hear this. I don't know if it matters, but if you do hear it, if you're human and you're listening, remember us. Remember what they did here. Remember that we did nothing wrong except exist." The transmission ended. 17 minutes later, it reached Earth. This celebrated their victory. They had destroyed an unarmed ship and murdered 2,400 civilians, including 847 children. They called it a great triumph. They called it a warning to all warm-blooded species. They did not understand what they had done. In homes across Earth, in colonies scattered among the stars, in space stations and research outposts and military bases, humans watched the footage. They saw the Harbinger's rest break apart. They heard the screams. They watched speak her final words with fire consuming everything around her. And something changed. Something old and terrible woke up in the human species, something that had slept since the darkest days of their history. It was rage. It was grief. It was a promise written in the blood of the innocent. The had wanted to send a message. They had succeeded beyond their wildest fears. Admiral had not slept in 3 days. He sat alone in his office at Luna Command, watching the massacre footage for the 100th time. The holographic display showed the Harbinger's rest breaking apart in slow motion. He had memorized every detail, every flash of fire, every silent scream. On his desk lay a data pad with the crew manifest. He had read every name. He had looked at every photograph. The youngest victim was 3 months old, a baby girl named Sophie, whose parents had dreamed of raising her on a new world under alien stars. Was 62 years old. He had fought in 2 wars and commanded fleets that numbered in the thousands. He had seen terrible things and done terrible things in the name of protecting his people, but nothing had prepared him for this. A knock came at his door. His aide entered with a careful expression. "Sir, the council is ready for you." The United Terran Coalition Council chamber was full when arrived. Politicians from Earth, Mars, and the outer colonies sat in curved rows, their faces lit by floating screens showing news feeds from across human space. The footage of the massacre played everywhere. No one could escape it. The council president, a tired woman named Director Hayes, called the session to order. "We are here to discuss our response to the attack," she said. "The diplomatic corps recommends economic sanctions and a formal protest to the Galactic Assembly. They have allies. War could cost us." "Cost us what?" The interruption came from Senator of Mars. His voice shook with barely controlled fury. "They killed children. They broadcast it like a sport. What could war possibly cost us that we haven't already lost?" The chamber erupted in argument. Some called for restraint. Others demanded immediate retaliation. The debate went in circles, growing louder and angrier with each passing minute. Then every screen in the room flickered. The news feeds changed. Someone had leaked the complete, unedited footage of the massacre, not just the ship's destruction, but the internal cameras. The council members watched in horror as fighters flew through the broken corridors, hunting survivors. They watched parents trying to shield their children. They watched the end. The chamber fell silent. Director Hayes stood frozen, her face pale. "Where did this come from?" she whispered. It didn't matter where it came from. Within an hour, every human in the galaxy had seen it. The public networks crashed under the traffic. Protests erupted on every world, not against war, but demanding it. People who had never agreed on anything in their lives stood together in the streets, united by grief and rage. Admiral watched the protests from his office window. Below him, thousands of people had gathered outside Luna Command, holding signs with the names of the dead. They were not shouting for peace. They were shouting for justice. His comm unit buzzed. Director Hayes appeared on the screen, looking older than she had an hour ago. "Admiral," she said quietly, The Council has reached a decision. It was unanimous, the first unanimous vote in 200 years. She transmitted a single document, read it in silence. When he finished, he looked up at the director with something new in his eyes. "No restraint," he said, reading the final line. "No mercy, no forgetting." "Make them pay," Hayes said. "Make them understand what they've done." Closed the transmission and began to smile. It was not a kind smile. It was the smile of a man who had spent his whole life preparing for a moment he had hoped would never come. He activated his command network. Across human space, priority alerts reached every military installation, every ship, every soldier. Standby orders became active orders. Secret programs that had slumbered for decades woke up. In asteroid fields hidden from prying eyes, massive shipyards powered up their forges. Ships that officially did not exist began their final preparations. Weapons that humanity had built and then locked away, weapons deemed too terrible for any civilized war, were brought out of storage. They had spies among the other galactic powers. They received reports of human fleet movements and passed them to Supreme Archon. He read the reports and laughed. "Let them come," he told his council. "Let them send their little fleet to posture and threaten. They will see our strength and lose their nerve. Warm bloods always do." His intelligence officers agreed. Humans were emotional creatures. They would rage for a while, then accept reality. A few border skirmishes, perhaps some harsh words at diplomatic meetings, and everything would return to normal. They did not understand humans at all. In training facilities across human space, soldiers watched the massacre footage before every session. They memorized the faces of the dead. They learned the names of the children. They trained harder than they had ever trained before, driven by a purpose that burned like fire in their chests. Admiral looked out at the stars from his command center. Somewhere out there, they were celebrating their victory. They thought they had taught humanity a lesson. They were about to learn how wrong they were. "All fleets," said into his command channel, his voice calm and cold. "Begin final preparations. We move in 6 weeks." The silence before the thunder had begun, and when the thunder came, it would shake the galaxy to its foundations. 6 weeks had passed since the massacre. The Third Fleet remained at the system, stationed around the debris field that had once been the Harbinger's Rest. Fleet Commander Al had ordered the wreckage left in place as a trophy, a reminder to any species foolish enough to challenge the hegemony. Al stood on the bridge of his flagship, reviewing reports of human fleet movements. The warm bloods were coming, apparently. A large force had been detected moving toward hegemony space. His mandibles clicked in amusement. "How many ships?" he asked his sensor officer. "Initial estimates suggest several hundred, Commander, perhaps 1,000. Al relaxed. The Third Fleet numbered 847 warships, each one built for destruction. The humans were bringing 1,000 ships to avenge a civilian vessel. It would be a slaughter, just not the kind they expected. "Let them come," he said. "We will add their wreckage to our collection." The hours passed slowly. The human fleet did not arrive. Al began to wonder if the warm bloods had lost their nerve after all. Perhaps they had realized the foolishness of their mission and turned back. Then the alarm started screaming. "Commander," the sensor officer shouted, his voice rising with fear. "Gravitational distortions, massive readings across the entire grid." "How many contacts?" The officer didn't answer. He was staring at his screen with all 4 of his eyes wide open. "How many?" Al demanded. I don't, the sensors can't." The sky tore open. It was not one fleet that emerged from fold space. It was 3. The first, second, and third expeditionary fleets of the United Terran Coalition dropped into reality in perfect formation, surrounding the position on all sides. The tactical display showed 3,200 human warships, nearly 4 times the numbers. But it was not the numbers that made Al's heart stop beating. It was the ships themselves. 12 massive vessels led the formation, each one larger than anything the hegemony had ever built. They were shaped like great hammers, bristling with weapons that glowed with barely contained energy. They had heard rumors of human dreadnoughts called Prometheus class, but they had believed them to be myths, propaganda meant to frighten enemies. The myths were real, and they were here. Behind the dreadnoughts came carrier groups, their bays opening to release fighter swarms that spread across the void like clouds of angry hornets. The stars themselves seemed to dim as the human fleet blocked out the light. Admiral's voice cut through every frequency, reaching every ship in the system, and human alike. This is Admiral of the United Terran Coalition. 6 weeks ago, you destroyed an unarmed civilian vessel in this system. You killed 2,400 people, including 847 children. You broadcast their deaths for entertainment. Paused. When he spoke again, his voice was ice. We are here to collect the debt. No surrender will be accepted. No mercy will be given. You showed none to our people. You will receive none from us. Fleet Commander Al tried to organize his forces. He screamed orders into his comm system, demanding his ships form defensive lines, concentrate fire on the largest targets, hold their positions. But his fleet was already in chaos. Ships collided as they tried to maneuver. Communications broke down as human electronic warfare systems flooded every channel with noise. The human fleet did not wait. They struck from every direction at once. The dreadnoughts fired first. Their main cannons released beams of energy so bright that crews went blind looking at them. 3 hegemony battleships vanished in the first second, not destroyed, but simply erased, turned to atoms and scattered across the void. Then the rest of the fleet opened fire. The battle, if it could be called that, lasted 11 minutes. The ships exploded one after another, filling space with fire and debris. Some tried to flee. Human interceptors ran them down. Some tried to surrender, broadcasting pleas for mercy on every frequency. The humans did not acknowledge them. Al watched his fleet die around him. The flagship shook as missiles tore through its hull. Fire spread through the corridors. His crew screamed and died. And through it all, he could hear Admiral's voice playing on repeat across the human frequencies. Remember the Harbinger's rest. Remember the children. Remember. The flagship broke apart. Al died in the explosion, still not understanding what had happened. He had expected a battle. He had received an execution. When the firing stopped, not a single ship remained. The debris of 847 warships mingled with the wreckage of the Harbinger's rest predator and prey, joined together in death. Admiral stood on the bridge of the unconditional resolve, surveying the destruction. His face showed no joy, no satisfaction, only grim determination. All ships, he said, set course for the hegemony interior. This isn't over, it's just beginning. The fleet moved forward, leaving the battlefield behind. Ahead lay the heart of the empire, their shipyards, their weapons factories, their military academies. All of it would burn. The hegemony's allies watched in shock. Diplomatic channels exploded with demands for humanity to stop, to negotiate, to show restraint. The coalition's response was the same to every message. Stay out of our way. The storm had broken, and it would not end until the debt was paid in full. 4 months had passed since the war began. 4 months of fire and destruction. 4 months of watching everything that had built over 12,000 years crumble to dust. Supreme Archon stood in his throne chamber on Ara Prime, the heart of the hegemony. Through the massive windows, he could see the sky burning orange with falling debris. His orbital defense grid, thousands of weapons platforms that had protected his world for centuries, was gone. The humans had destroyed it in a single day. His advisors had fled. His generals were dead or captured. His fleets existed only as scattered wreckage drifting through 100 systems. The greatest military power in this region of the galaxy had been dismantled like a child's toy. But that was not what haunted. That was not what kept him awake at night, staring at reports he could not believe. The humans had not touched civilians. On every world they had conquered, in every system they had taken, human soldiers had gone out of their way to protect non-combatants. They had established safe zones. They had delivered food and medicine. They had rescued larvae from burning buildings and carried injured workers to medical stations. The Propaganda Bureau had tried to hide this information. They had broadcast stories of human atrocities, claiming the warm bloods were slaughtering innocents by the millions. But the truth spread anyway. Citizens shared videos of human soldiers giving water to thirsty children. They told stories of enemies who killed warriors but protected the weak. One video had spread across the entire hegemony. It showed a human marine, a giant in powered armor, cradling a larva in her arms. The building behind her was burning. Soldiers lay dead around her, but she had stopped fighting to save a child of the enemy. The message was devastating. It said, "We are not like you. We could have done what you did to us. We chose not to." Heard the thunder of landing ships outside his palace. He walked to the window and watched descend through the smoke-filled sky. Human vessels, carrying human soldiers, coming to finish what they had started. But they did not attack the palace. They landed in the central plaza and opened their doors. A single figure emerged, a human woman in formal diplomatic attire, flanked by soldiers whose armor bore strange markings. Translators told him the markings were names, 2,400 names, written on the armor of every soldier. The names of the dead. The woman walked into the palace without resistance. His guards had abandoned their posts days ago. She climbed the stairs to his throne chamber and entered without knocking. "Supreme Archon," she said. Her voice was calm and cold. "I am Ambassador Sarah of the United Terran Coalition. I am here to discuss the terms of your surrender." Tried to summon his old authority. He straightened his body and clicked his mandibles in a gesture of contempt. "The hegemony does not surrender to warm bloods. We have ruled this region of space for 12,000 years. We will endure." Ambassador reached into her coat and produced a data tablet. She placed it on the table before him. "Unconditional surrender," she said. "Complete disarmament of all remaining military forces. War crimes tribunals for every officer involved in the massacre. Reparations paid to the families of the victims over the next 300 years." Laughed a harsh clicking sound. "And if I refuse?" "Then we continue. We have already destroyed your fleet, your shipyards, your weapons factories, and your military academies. If you refuse, we will dismantle your government next. We will remove you and everyone who supported you. We will rebuild your society from the ground up, with or without your cooperation." "You would not dare." "We would not have dared 6 months ago," interrupted. 6 months ago we wanted peace. We wanted to explore the galaxy and build new homes for our children. Your people changed that. You taught us that some enemies cannot be reasoned with. You taught us that some crimes cannot be forgiven. She leaned forward, her eyes hard as stone. "But we are not monsters. We have not killed your civilians even though you killed ours. We have not broadcast your suffering for entertainment, even though you broadcast ours. We have proven to you and to the entire galaxy that humanity is better than the hegemony ever was." His mandibles trembled. For the first time in 200 years, he felt something he had forgotten existed: fear. "There is one more term," continued. "You will build a memorial on this world, a monument to the 2,400 lives you stole, and every child, for the rest of your civilization's existence, will learn what was done in their name. They will learn what happens when a species mistakes kindness for weakness." She stepped back and gestured to the tablet. "Sign it, or watch everything your species has built burn to ash." Looked at the tablet. He looked at the soldiers with their armor covered in names. He looked out the window at the burning sky. And he signed. The war was over. The hegemony had fallen. And across the galaxy, every species watched in silence, understanding that the universe had changed forever. Humanity had been pushed to the edge. They had stared into the darkness and found something terrible inside themselves. But they had also found something else, something that made them different from the empires that had come before. They had found mercy, not weakness, not surrender, but the strength to stop when the killing was done. They would never forget that lesson. Neither would anyone else. 10 years had passed since the war ended. The galaxy had changed in ways that no one could have predicted. The memorial on Ara Prime stood at the center of the capital city, built on the exact spot where the Supreme Archon's palace had once risen. The palace was gone now, torn down stone by stone, its materials used to construct something new, something that would last forever. A wall of white stone stretched for half a kilometer, curving gently like an embrace. On its surface, 2,400 names were carved in letters that caught the light and seemed to glow. Each name was accompanied by a small holographic display showing a face, a life, a story that had been cut short. At the center of the memorial stood a statue of Captain. She was not depicted as a warrior or a hero. She was shown simply standing, her hand raised in a gesture of peace, her face calm and kind. Beneath the statue, her final words were carved into the stone, "Remember us." The memorial had become a pilgrimage site. Every year, thousands of humans traveled across the galaxy to stand before the wall and pay their respects, but they were not the only visitors. Young came here on school trips now. Teachers led them along the wall, stopping at each name, telling the stories of the people who had died. The children listened in silence, their compound eyes reflecting the faces of the dead. The lessons had changed since the war. Younglings no longer learned that other species were inferior. They no longer heard stories of conquest and domination. Instead, they learned about the massacre. They learned about the war that followed. They learned what their ancestors had done and what it had cost them. Some of the older hated these lessons. They whispered in private about the glory days, about the power their species had once held. But their numbers grew smaller every year. The young ones did not want to return to the old ways. They had seen where those ways led. Admiral, now retired, visited the memorial once each year on the anniversary of the massacre. He was 82 years old, his hair white and his movements slow. But his eyes were still sharp, still carrying the weight of everything he had seen and done. He stood before the statue of and remembered the woman he had never met. He had watched her final transmission 1,000 times. He knew her face better than he knew his own. In his dreams, he still heard her voice. "We did it," he whispered to the statue. "We remembered, we always will." A young approached him, a female barely out of her larval stage, her carapace still soft and pale. She looked up at the old human with wide, curious eyes. "Excuse me," she said in careful, practiced English. "Are you Admiral, the one from the history lessons?" Smiled sadly, "I am." "I wanted to say," she hesitated, searching for the right words, "I am sorry for what my people did. I know I was not born yet. I know it was not my choice, but I am still sorry." Looked at her for a long moment. Then he knelt down, bringing himself to her eye level. "What's your name?" he asked. "Ra." "Ra," he repeated. "Do you know why we built this memorial here, on your world instead of ours?" She shook her head. "Because we wanted your people to see it every day, not as a punishment, not as a reminder of shame, but as a promise." He gestured at the wall of names. "These people died because of hatred and fear. We fought a war because of hatred and fear, but hatred and fear don't have to last forever. Look around you." Ra looked. She saw human tourists walking alongside families. She saw children of both species playing together near the reflecting pools. She saw a human woman helping an elderly to a bench in the shade. "This is what we wanted," said. "Not revenge, not eternal punishment. We wanted a future where something like the massacre could never happen again. We wanted your children and our children to grow up together, to learn from each other, to be better than we were." He stood up slowly, his old joints protesting. "The people whose names are on that wall died for nothing. There was no reason, no purpose, no meaning in their deaths. We couldn't change that, but we could make sure their deaths led to something good. We could build a galaxy where their children's children would never have to be afraid." Ra looked at the wall again. The names seemed different now, not just symbols of tragedy but seeds of something new. "Do you think we're getting better?" she asked. "All of us, I mean, the whole galaxy." Thought about the question. He thought about the dark years of the war, the rage that had consumed his species, the terrible things they had been willing to do. He thought about the choice they had made to stop, to show mercy, to build instead of destroy. "I think we're trying," he said, "and trying is all anyone can do." He walked away, leaving the young standing before the memorial. She stayed there for a long time, reading the names, looking at the faces. On the colony world of New Haven, built in the same system where the massacre had occurred, humans and lived side by side. Former enemies had become neighbors. Old hatreds had faded into history. Children played together without knowing or caring about the wars their grandparents had fought. The galaxy was not perfect. It would never be perfect. There would always be conflict, misunderstanding, and fear. But something had changed on the day of the massacre. Something had shifted in the balance of power and morality. Humanity had shown the universe what they were capable of, both the terrible fury and the quiet mercy. They had proven that strength was not just about winning wars. It was about knowing when to stop fighting. The stars burned on as they always had, but the beings who lived among them were different now. They had learned a lesson written in blood and fire and carved in white stone. Some wounds never fully heal, but they can still lead to something beautiful.